Welcome back to the next big game, Titanfall. Earlier this week we talked to the folks at Respawn about their 4-year journey building the game, but today we're going to focus in on the two players in this delicately balanced game of death. This is pilots versus titans. If there is a single defining element that makes Titanfall feel like a new breed of first-person shooter, it's the varying levels of combat that take place between pilots and titans. And if there was a single concern gamers had about Titanfall, it's how do you ensure battles between soldiers and super-powered robot suits are fair and balanced. The relationship between pilots and titans is at the core of Titanfall. It defines how you approach combat, it dictates the tactical decisions you make, and it's at the root of why Titanfall is such an interesting game. From talking to the team behind Titanfall, it's clear this has been a delicate balancing act right from the very start. How do you make controlling a Titan feel powerful without hindering the pilot side of gameplay? To get to the root of this, we asked Titanfall game director Steve Fukuda what it's like stepping into the shoes of either. First up, pilots.
Well, what the great thing about being a pilot is that you can run off the walls, double jump, your maneuverability is very high. So when you're in like a built-up area where there's lots of buildings, lots of interiors, you generally have a bit of an edge over the Titan. So you want to be creative and imaginative, looking at the environment, saying, hey, can I go that way? Or think about your exit strategy at every moment. Saying, okay, if something happens here, if a Titan comes around that corner, where am I actually going to go? Am I going to go book it for that wall and then kick off that wall, go through that window? How am I going to do this? And what kind of weapons do I have? That's another layer you have to factor in, is what are my anti-Titan weapons? Do I have, for example, the Archer heavy rocket? That's something I'm going to want to lock on from a distance, and I'm going to want to use it against an advanced player. They're going to notice that you're locking onto them, so you got to be careful that you're not the only thing they're worrying about. If they're busy fighting another Titan, or they're fixated or target fixated on something, this is a good opportunity to use that weapon, and it does considerable amounts of damage or finish a guy off. If you're using the Sidewinder, you have to lead the target considerably, and it helps a lot to get in close and aim for those critical points on the Titan when you drop its shields. So what you've got in terms of abilities as well, do you have stim, do you have cloak as a pilot? You have to use cloaking in order to make yourself more or less invisible to the Titans. So you could actually be sitting there, you have that Jurassic Park moment where the T-Rex is there and they don't see you there. Using cloaking is really important in there, but you can't have that and stim at the same time. Stim allows you to move very quickly through the level for short periods of time. How you play, what your style is, what you feel your strengths are as a player, as a pilot on the ground will factor into there. And above all else, don't get into a pissing match with a Titan in the open ground. This is that's why cloaks help on the open ground. It's your one saving grace. If you don't have cloak, you're using stim, you need to rethink your strategy a little bit.
The team at Respawn seem to have put a lot of effort into ensuring Titans feel powerful but vulnerable enough that the right weapon and some sort of lateral thinking can result in a David versus Goliath style kill. A delicate balancing act indeed, and not one that came about easily.
Yeah, the hardest thing about balancing the Titans and the pilots in Titanfall was making it fair for both sides. At one point, the Titans had regenerating health, so they were able to fully regenerate their health, and it sucked as a pilot because you hit them with something and you're risking your life. And even though you might hit them, they're just going to regenerate that health, and it was infuriating. So we ended up having to make pilot weapons that were capable of killing a Titan very quickly, which then made it frustrating to be a Titan. And then Titans were getting killed by pilots like that, but they'd fight other Titans forever, and that didn't make sense. So then we ended up with this other health system that would kind of take their health down permanently, but then you found that when you're at 10% as a Titan, your Titan was basically useless. So you wouldn't want to engage another Titan, you didn't feel comfortable, you didn't feel safe walking around, you'd end up just abandoning it. So we ended up with the system that we have now, which is a Titan's shield will always regenerate, but they're always taking a little bit of permanent damage when they're hit. And so even as a pilot, if you're not able to finish off the Titan, you know that you didn't just damage its shield, you did damage it a little bit permanently. And if you're really good as a pilot, or you use the right skill, or you attack the right way, or you catch an unassuming Titan, you can finish it off.
Well, we had this whole notion of, at first, because Titans were the relatively unknown design space, or unexplored design space, for us anyway, robots and games, they call them mechs, they've got something of a bad reputation. They're known as being slow and unwieldy, and they can also be complicated and very simulator oriented. So what we want to do is sort of make sure that as a pilot, your experience as a pilot and your familiarity with those kinds of controls would translate transition very smoothly into the experience of a Titan. So the Titans tend to be fairly mobile, very smooth, and somewhat agile, depending on which of the Titan chassis you're using. It was kind of fortuitous that we finally arrived at this very martial arts meets jet fighter pilot kind of dynamic as far as Titans versus Titans go.
But the battlefields of Titanfall aren't just about pilots and Titans. There's a third player in the combat who adds just as much to the power struggle: the AI combatants. Not only do they encourage new players to engage in combat and act as a fun way to take time off of your Titanfall counter, but their vulnerability contrasts the strength of the human players. Titanfall isn't a game about one-shot kills. Battles are ballets of gunfire and dodging, echoing past titans of online shooting like Unreal Tournament and Quake. Instead of being a disposable soldier, you feel like you're an important player in a larger battle, and the AI creep certainly plays its part.
The AI in Titanfall are there for a multitude of reasons. They were never ever in there to replace players. That was something that we never considered. It was just, yeah, these guys are awesome. Look at the things they can do. They make new players feel good about themselves. They make great players feel like badasses. Like still to this day, one of my favorite things to do is just to wall run with the smart pistol, bounce off walls while locking onto a bunch of grunts below, just picking them off while I'm working my way to wherever I'm trying to go.
Multiplayer can be a zero-sum game where someone's getting a lot of kills, that means someone's dying a lot. So, we have the grunts and the specters, AI that are relatively easy to kill. So for new players, it's something to get instant gratification, get a sense of progress, and without getting beaten down. With for advanced players, they turn out to be more like target practice, but they add also to the vibrance of the level, the sense of activity and the cinematic nature. Now as Titans, so it's sort of coming back from survivability, that's what Titans provide to a large extent for new players. It was important actually to make sure that there were fights. So often shooters, I think, they moved into this direction, which once upon a time was very fresh. Remember the original Rainbow Six? It was like, bang, you're dead, bang, you're dead. It took an adjustment period actually to get used to that, having come off, say, Quake back in the day. But with this game, we wanted to make sure we had fights. Like actual, I shoot at you, you shoot at me. We don't just, whoever sees the other guy first isn't going to necessarily just end it. It's more like, there's going to be a bit of play there. Oh, now the fight's on, fight's on.
In Titanfall, Respawn have attempted to create a game in which you always have your part to play in the battle. And if they've pulled it off, then no matter if you're piloting a powerful mechanical suit or running along the side of a building and collecting headshots, you'll always have a story to tell.
What other game do you have a situation where you're on top of a Titan, suddenly that guy realizes you're there, so he decides to eject, he ejects, but that sends both of you flying into the air. You're in the air shooting at each other, air controlling. Meanwhile, people are shooting up at you from below, and then you get close enough, he makes a mistake, so you kick him in midair. He goes flying to his dropping, you land on the ground, his corpse hits the ground. You then jump onto another Titan and keep on rolling and riding that wave, and you have this, you'll have so many stories to tell of your own in this game, and it's always visceral and always cinematic. It's always a story to tell as a player, and it's a very unique experience that way.
That was a breakdown of the relationship between pilots and Titans in Titanfall. Later this week on The Next Big Game, we break apart the anatomy of a Titanfall map and talk to Respawn co-founder Vince Ampella about life after Call of Duty. Make sure to catch all that and more all this week over on Gamespot.com.